I always thought I had a solid marriage. 12 years together, 2 kids, a house we both loved, and a life that looked pretty damn good on the outside. But recently, things had started to feel off. My wife, Jennifer, was acting weird, distant, almost detached. She stopped asking me about my day, started spending more time on her phone, and was constantly going out with friends. And not just her usual group, no, she had these new friends. I never got to meet them, never saw their names come up in conversation. Red flag number 1, right? Now, I'm not the paranoid type. I never wanted to be that guy, the one who's always second-guessing his wife. But then, it just started stacking up. The long nights where she'd come home late and dismissively say she lost track of time. The sudden need to look good every time she ran errands. And don't even get me started on the sex life, dead. Like, seriously dead. For months now, she'd have excuses. Too tired, too stressed, not in the mood. All the classics. And then, the final straw. We were supposed to have dinner with our good friends, Mark and his wife, Sarah. They've been in our lives for years. Mark and I go way back, like college dorm mates back. So, we all get together, have some wine, and it's like Jennifer is overly flirty with Mark. At first, I brushed it off, maybe it was the wine. But then, it kept happening. Laughing at his dumb jokes, touching his arm a little too much. It was right there in front of Sarah, who was busy talking to me, completely unaware. It all clicked. The gut feeling was there, but I needed proof. Something to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I ordered some hidden cameras online. I felt sick even typing it into the search bar, but I needed to know. If she was up to something with Mark or whoever, I'd find out. Little did I know, I was walking into a nightmare. It took a few days for the cameras to arrive, and each day felt like an eternity. Every time Jennifer would leave the house, I found myself obsessing over where she was really going. I didn't want to be this guy, the dude sneaking around in his own house, but I had no choice. There was something going on, and I had to find out what. When the cameras finally arrived, I felt a weird mix of excitement and dread. I set them up in the living room, the hallway, and, most importantly, the bedroom. I didn't feel good about that last one, but if something was going on, that's where I figured the action would be. The whole process of installing them was nerve-wracking. My hands were shaking as I placed the tiny, unnoticeable devices in the corners of the room. I felt like a criminal in my own home. But I kept telling myself, if she's cheating, you need to know. For a couple of days, nothing happened. Jennifer went about her usual routine, coming home late from errands, scrolling endlessly on her phone, and giving me the cold shoulder in bed. I started to think maybe I was wrong, that I had become paranoid and was about to ruin my marriage over some irrational suspicion. Then came Friday. I was at work when I got the alert. The cameras were motion activated, and one had picked up something in the living room. My heart started racing, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I waited. A couple of hours later, another alert, this time from the bedroom. I couldn't resist. I pulled out my phone, found a quiet spot at work, and watched the footage. There she was. Jennifer, walking into the house, and who followed her in? Fucking Mark. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. This was it. All those late nights, the distance, the lies, this was the confirmation. They sat on the couch, had a drink, and then, just like that, they were all over each other. No hesitation, no guilt. Just pure betrayal. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but I kept watching. They made their way to our bedroom, my bedroom, and I had to stop the video. I couldn't watch anymore. I was shaking, seeing red, barely able to keep it together. The worst part? Mark's wife, Sarah, was one of Jennifer's best friends. She had no idea. None of us did. I left work early that day. There was no way I could sit at my desk, pretending like my entire world hadn't just shattered. My mind was spinning as I drove home, rage, disbelief, sadness, it was all a blur. And the worst part? I couldn't decide if I was more angry at Jennifer or Mark. I trusted both of them. Jennifer, my wife, the woman I'd vowed to spend my life with. And Mark, the guy who had been by my side through so much, now betraying me in the worst way possible. When I pulled into the driveway, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I just sat there for a while, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Confront her. Call Mark. What about Sarah? Could I even tell her, or would that make things even messier? My brain was a mess, but I knew one thing for sure, I had to talk to Jennifer. I couldn't sit on this any longer. When I walked into the house, she was already home, sitting in the kitchen like everything was completely normal. She gave me one of those casual, "Hey, how was your day?" greetings like nothing had changed. It was like a punch to the gut, seeing her so calm, so indifferent, after what she had done. I couldn't even look at her. "Sit down," I said, my voice more shaky than I wanted it to be. She furrowed her brow, clearly sensing something was off. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "I know. About you and Mark." Her face froze for a split second before she turned on the theatrics. "What? What are you talking about? Me and Mark? That's ridiculous." Her voice was too defensive, too fake. "I saw you," I said, cutting her off before she could lie anymore. "I saw the footage. I put cameras in the house, Jennifer. I saw you both." Her face went pale. That cocky, dismissive attitude she'd been throwing around for months. Gone in an instant. She opened her mouth, probably to spew some bullshit excuse, but nothing came out. She was caught, and she knew it. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why him? Why anyone?" She sat there, blinking like an idiot, as if she was trying to figure out the right angle to play this. And then, as if on cue, she started crying. The tears, the sobs, it was all so disgustingly predictable. "I'm sorry," she whimpered. "It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, I swear. I've just been so unhappy lately, and Mark, he was just there. Just there." I snapped. "He's supposed to be my fucking friend, Jennifer. And you've been sneaking around behind my back with him? In our house?" She flinched at my tone but quickly pulled herself together. "You've been so distant. Always working, never paying attention to me. I needed, I don't know, attention, affection. And you weren't giving it to me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying to turn this around on me, like somehow, her affair was my fault. Classic. "Oh, so now this is my fault?" I said, shaking my head. "Unbelievable. You're sleeping with my best friend, and it's because I didn't pay you enough attention. Get the fuck out of here with that." She went on, crying about how lonely she'd been, how she didn't mean for it to happen, how she was sorry. It was all just noise at that point. I didn't believe a word of it. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jennifer sobbing at the table. I couldn't be near her. Every word she said just made me angrier. Her excuses, her pathetic attempts to justify what she'd done, it all felt like a sick game. I needed space, needed to think. So, I locked myself in the bedroom, the same room where she'd been with Mark, and punched the wall so hard I thought I'd broken my hand. The pain was sharp, but it barely registered. I was drowning in a flood of anger and betrayal. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark. Every memory I had with him, every time we'd hung out, every stupid joke we'd shared, it was all tainted now. He was supposed to be my friend. How long had this been going on? How many times had they met up? It was like a dagger twisting in my gut. I knew I couldn't let him get away with this. He had to know I found out. So, I picked up my phone and texted him. We need to talk. Now. I didn't expect him to reply right away, but of course, he did. Mark, hey man, everything okay? That lying son of a bitch. I could practically hear his smug tone through the text, pretending like everything was normal. I didn't bother texting back. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed straight for his place. Jennifer called after me as I stormed out the front door, still crying, still begging me to talk to her. But I wasn't hearing any of it. I needed to confront Mark, face to face. The drive to his house felt like an eternity, my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was ready to crush it. By the time I pulled up to his place, I could barely see straight, I was so angry. I banged on his door, and when he opened it, his face went pale. I must have looked insane, eyes wild, fists clenched, but I didn't care. He knew. You fucking coward, I growled, shoving past him into his house. How long? He didn't even try to deny it. Didn't make up some weak excuse. He just stood there, staring at me with this guilty, pathetic look on his face. I'm sorry, man, he mumbled, eyes downcast. I don't know what to say. That's it? That's all you've got? I snapped. You sleep with my wife, my fucking wife, and you don't know what to say. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly panicking now. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just. Oh, cut the bullshit. I yelled. It didn't just happen. You made a choice, Mark. You made a fucking choice every time you touched her. In my house. While your wife, Sarah, has no idea what's going on. At the mention of Sarah, he flinched. Good. He deserved to feel like the scumbag he was. I thought about calling her right then, letting her know the truth, but something held me back. This was already a disaster. Dragging Sarah into it felt like a whole other level of hell. But she'd have to know eventually. Mark just stood there, not saying a word, looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole. He didn't even try to defend himself. Just let me rage at him like a broken record, and honestly, I didn't stop. I wanted him to feel every ounce of my anger. But it wasn't enough. None of it was. After what felt like hours of shouting at Mark, something in me just snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. The yelling, the anger, it wasn't making anything better. It wasn't taking away the hurt. All I saw when I looked at him was the broken friendship, the betrayal that was now an immovable weight on my chest. I backed away, exhausted, shaking my head. You're not worth it, I said, my voice barely a whisper now. None of this is worth it. Mark stood there, frozen, like he didn't know what to do. He opened his mouth to say something, but I wasn't listening anymore. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I drove away, I realized something that hit me harder than all the rage and betrayal combined. I didn't just lose my wife, I lost my best friend, too. Mark was someone I'd trusted, shared so many years of my life with. And in one swift, stupid act, he ruined everything. I wasn't sure which loss hurt more, Jennifer or him. Maybe both. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do next. My life was falling apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. I thought about going home, but the thought of seeing Jennifer's face again made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't go back there yet. Instead, I pulled into a quiet park and just sat there, staring at the trees, the empty benches, trying to process everything. I felt empty, like I had nothing left. The worst part? I didn't even know where to start rebuilding. Jennifer's betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was a wrecking ball that had destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. I started thinking about Sarah. She had no idea, and I knew that keeping her in the dark was cruel, but I also wasn't sure I had the energy to break her world apart too. I was stuck in this terrible dilemma: do I tell her? Or do I let her live in blissful ignorance for just a little while longer? Before I could figure it out, my phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Jennifer, where are you? Please come home. We need to talk." Talk? What the hell was left to talk about? She'd already shown me who she really was, and it was a version of her I didn't even recognize anymore. I wasn't sure I could ever love that version of her again. I was starting to think maybe I never really knew her at all. But I knew I couldn't avoid this forever. As much as I wanted to run, to bury my head in the sand and forget all of this ever happened, I had to face it. I had to make a decision about what came next. So, with a heavy heart and zero confidence in what the hell I was about to do, I turned the car around and headed back to the house. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes, just staring at the house. It felt like walking into a war zone. Every memory, every moment of happiness we'd shared in that home, felt tainted now. I wasn't sure how I was going to step through that door and face her. But I had to. So, I took a deep breath and went inside. Jennifer was sitting on the couch, looking as wrecked as I felt. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and when she saw me, she stood up, like she was ready to plead her case again. But I wasn't in the mood for more excuses. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand to stop her. "Just, don't." She froze, biting her lip like she was trying to figure out what to say. I didn't care what she had to say at this point. Her words meant nothing to me anymore. The damage was done. "I know you're angry," she started, her voice shaking. "And I know you have every right to be. But can we please just talk about this? Please." "What's there to talk about?" I asked, my voice flat. "You cheated on me. With my best friend. In our house. What part of that do you think I'm going to want to discuss?" She took a shaky breath, wiping at her eyes. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I am so sorry. But I still love you. I don't want to throw away everything we've built because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I repeated, incredulous. "It wasn't one mistake, Jennifer. This wasn't a one-time thing. You've been sneaking around with him for God knows how long. Don't try to downplay this." She winced, knowing I was right. I know. But I was confused. I felt lost. You were never home, always working, and I felt like we were drifting apart. I needed someone. Someone. I shouted, my patience finally snapping. "So you turned to Mark? The guy who's been in our lives for years? That's your excuse? Because I was working, you decided to screw my best friend? That's what you needed?" She started crying again, covering her face with her hands. But I wasn't moved. I was done with the tears. I wanted honesty, not this manipulative guilt trip she was trying to pull. "You don't get to cry, Jennifer," I said, my voice cold. "You don't get to play the victim here." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not trying to play the victim. I don't know how to fix this. I don't want to lose you." I stood there, staring at her, feeling nothing but disgust. She didn't want to lose me. She should have thought about that before she brought Mark into our bed. "You already lost me," I said quietly. "The moment you made that choice, we were done." The silence between us was suffocating. Jennifer sat back down on the couch, her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't have any sympathy left for her. I wasn't even sure if I had the energy to stay angry anymore. I was just empty. "I'm leaving," I said, heading toward the door. "What? Where are you going?" she asked, standing up, panic in her voice. "I don't know," I replied. But I can't stay here. Not with you. And just like that, I walked out the door, leaving her standing in the living room, crying and calling after me. But her voice faded into the background as I got into the car and drove away, not knowing where I was headed, just that I couldn't be there anymore. I drove around aimlessly for what felt like hours. I couldn't go back home, and I wasn't ready to face anyone else, but I knew I couldn't keep running forever. There was still one thing I hadn't done, something I'd been avoiding. I needed to tell Sarah, Mark's wife, what had been happening behind her back. The idea of ripping her world apart made me sick to my stomach, but she had the right to know. I couldn't let her live in blissful ignorance while her husband betrayed her with my wife. I pulled over to the side of the road and sat there, staring at my phone. How do you even begin that conversation? Hey, your husband and my wife are screwing each other. It felt impossible, but it was necessary. My fingers hovered over her contact info for what seemed like an eternity before I finally dialed her number. The phone rang, and I could feel my heart racing. A part of me hoped she wouldn't answer, that I could delay this confrontation a little longer. But after a few rings, she picked up. Hey. What's up? Sarah's voice was cheerful, completely unaware of the storm about to hit her. Hey, Sarah, I said, my voice shaky. I need to talk to you about something. It's really important. Are you free to meet? There was a long pause. I could hear the concern creeping into her voice. Yeah, sure. Is everything okay? You sound off. Not really, I admitted. I'll explain when we meet. Can you meet me at the park near your house? Yeah, I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said, the worry now fully evident. I hung up and drove to the park, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. This wasn't just about me anymore. I was about to turn someone else's life upside down, and there was no way to sugarcoat it. When I arrived, I saw Sarah pulling up in her car. She got out, looking confused and a little anxious. I got out of my car and walked toward her, trying to find the right words, but nothing felt right. How the hell do you tell someone their life is a lie? Hey, she said, walking up to me. You're freaking me out. What's going on? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't know how to say this, but you need to know. It's about Mark. And Jennifer. Her eyes widened. What? What about them? They've been having an affair, I said, the words finally spilling out. I found out a few days ago. I put cameras in the house because I suspected something was off. And I saw them. Together. In my house. Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she was going to pass out. She stumbled back, putting a hand to her mouth in shock. No. No, that can't be right, she said, shaking her head. Mark wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. I'm so sorry, I said, my voice cracking. I didn't want to believe it either, but I saw the footage. It's real. I'm sorry. Tears welled up in her eyes as the reality hit her. She sat down on a nearby bench, her whole body trembling. How long? How long has this been going on? I don't know, I admitted. I just found out a few days ago. But I think it's been a while. Sarah buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I sat next to her, feeling completely helpless. What could I even say? There was no way to soften the blow. Her entire life had just crumbled, just like mine had. I don't understand, she whispered through her tears. Why would they do this? Why? I've been asking myself the same thing, I said quietly. I don't have any answers. I wish I did. We sat in silence for a while, her sobs filling the air, and I realized that this wasn't just about Jennifer and Mark anymore. It was about the four of us, the tangled web of lies and betrayal that we were all trapped in. Sarah had been blindsided just like me, and now we were both left to pick up the pieces. After a while, she wiped her eyes and looked at me, her face a mix of devastation and anger. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I left. I couldn't stay there. I think it's over between us." She nodded, her face hardening as the anger took hold. "I'm going to talk to Mark. I want answers." I didn't envy her. I'd already gone through that confrontation, and it hadn't made me feel any better. But she needed to do it. She needed closure. "Do you want me to come with you?" I asked, unsure of what else to offer. "No," she said firmly, standing up. "I need to do this on my own." I watched as she walked away, her shoulders slumped, and I felt the crushing weight of it all settle back in. There was no going back now. The truth was out, and none of our lives would ever be the same again. I stayed at the park for a while after Sarah left, just staring at the empty playground. I felt hollow inside, like someone had scooped out my heart and replaced it with a lead weight. There was no going back from this, no way to unsee what I'd seen, no way to undo the damage. The only question now was, what next? I thought about going to a hotel, maybe just crashing there for a few days to clear my head. But the truth was, no amount of distance was going to fix this. The betrayal, the lies, they'd follow me wherever I went. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's face when I told her. The shock, the disbelief, and finally, the anger. She didn't deserve this. None of us did. But there we were, stuck in the middle of this train wreck, trying to figure out how to move forward. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Late afternoon. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My friends? They were all tied up in this mess, either too close to Mark or too unaware of what was happening. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this. It felt too raw, too shameful. Then, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Jennifer. "Jennifer, please come home. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of dread and exhaustion. What was left to talk about? We'd already gone over everything, her excuses, my anger, the betrayal. It was all out in the open now. But something told me that going home was the only way to figure out what came next. Whether we were ending things for good or trying to salvage whatever was left, I needed to face it head on. So, reluctantly, I started the car and drove back. The house looked the same as always when I pulled into the driveway, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place full of ghosts, memories of what had been, now shattered by lies. When I walked in, Jennifer was waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she hadn't stopped crying since I left, her eyes puffy and red. But I wasn't moved by it. I couldn't be. I was too drained, too numb. "You came back," she said softly, her voice tentative, like she wasn't sure if I was about to walk out again. "I don't know why," I replied honestly, sitting down on the opposite side of the room. "I don't even know what there is left to say." Jennifer fidgeted with her hands, clearly trying to figure out how to start. "I don't want to lose you," she finally said. "I know I messed up. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I don't want this to be the end. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." I leaned back in the chair, staring at her, trying to gauge whether she was being sincere or just desperate. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could somehow repair the wreckage. But the other part of me, the part that had seen the footage of her with Mark, knew better. "How do you even expect to fix this?" I asked, my voice flat. "You think saying sorry and crying is going to erase what you did?" She flinched, like my words had physically hurt her, but I didn't stop. I needed to know what her plan was. I needed to know if she had any real idea of how deep the damage went. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to try. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Just, don't walk away. I stared at her, the desperation in her eyes, and for a second, I felt a flicker of something. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was the remnants of love that hadn't completely died yet. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make me forget the betrayal. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted. I don't know if I can just go to therapy and pretend like this never happened. She nodded, wiping her tears. I know. I know it's going to take time. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. Please. I sat there, the silence between us thick with everything unsaid. Could I even do it? Could I really give her another chance? Or was it better to just walk away, cut my losses, and start over? I need time, I finally said. I need time to think about all of this. You've broken something in me, Jennifer. I don't know if it can be fixed. She didn't say anything, just nodded, more tears slipping down her face. I'll stay here, I continued, but I'm not promising anything. I don't know what I want yet. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever want what we had again. She looked at me, hopeful but devastated. Okay, she whispered. I'll wait. However long it takes. I stood up, too exhausted to continue the conversation. I'm going to bed, I muttered, heading toward the stairs. As I climbed up, I realized that even though I was physically back in the house, mentally, I was miles away. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't ever coming back. The days that followed were a blur. Jennifer kept her distance, like she was walking on eggshells around me, afraid to set me off. I was numb most of the time, too tired to feel anything but the overwhelming sense of loss that lingered in every corner of the house. I still hadn't told anyone else about what had happened. My family, our friends, nobody knew. It was like carrying around this unbearable weight, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could handle it. Jennifer tried, I'll give her that. She cleaned the house obsessively, made dinner every night, and even tried to start casual conversations with me, but it all felt hollow. It was like she was doing everything she could to pretend that things were normal, that if she just worked hard enough, we could get back to how things used to be. But the truth was, nothing was normal. Nothing ever would be again. Every time I saw her, all I could think about was her with Mark, the lies, the betrayal. I couldn't get the images out of my head. I couldn't stop hearing her excuses, the way she tried to pin it on me, saying I wasn't around enough, that she needed someone. It was pathetic. One evening, about a week after I'd confronted her, I decided I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't Jennifer. So, I called my brother, Dan. He's always been the level-headed one, the guy who can talk me down when I'm about to explode. When he answered, I didn't even say hello. I just blurted it out. Jennifer cheated on me. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then, what? Dude, are you serious? Yeah, I said, the bitterness in my voice seeping through. With Mark. Wait, Mark. As in your best friend Mark. That Mark? That's the one. Jesus Christ. Dan sounded as shocked as I'd been when I first found out. I'm so sorry, man. What the hell are you gonna do? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. I haven't decided yet. She's begging for another chance. Says she's willing to do therapy, whatever it takes. But I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I want to. Look, Dan said, his voice calm but firm. You've been through hell, and I get why you're not sure what to do. But don't feel like you have to rush into any decision. You've got to figure out what's right for you, not for her. I know, I said, leaning back against the kitchen counter. It's just. I feel like I've already lost so much. My marriage, my best friend. If I walk away, what's left? Sometimes walking away is the only way to start over, he said. You don't owe her anything, man. She made her choices. Now it's about what you need. I sat there, staring at the floor, thinking about what he said. Maybe he was right. Maybe walking away was the only way to heal. But then there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, this part of me that still loved Jennifer, or at least the version of her that I used to know. Could I really let go of everything we'd built? I'll figure it out, I said eventually. I just needed to tell someone. Keeping it in was driving me crazy. I'm glad you called, Dan replied. I'm here for whatever you need, okay? Thanks, I muttered, feeling a little lighter, if only for a moment. After we hung up, I sat there in the quiet house, my mind racing. I was at a crossroads. I could either try to make it work with Jennifer, if that was even possible, or I could walk away and start over. Neither option felt great. Both felt like losing something important. But one thing was clear, I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. That night, Jennifer came into the bedroom while I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should come closer. Can we talk? She asked softly. I looked up at her, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. About what? I know you're still angry, she began, stepping forward slowly. And I don't blame you. I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to make up for. But I need to know, are you willing to try? To give us another chance? I stared at her, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. Was I willing to try again? Or was it time to let go? Jennifer stood there, her eyes pleading with me, waiting for an answer that I didn't know if I had. The weight of her question hung heavy in the room. She wanted me to say yes, to give her another chance, but I wasn't sure if I could. Not after everything. I don't know, I said, my voice low and tired. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Jennifer. She flinched, like my words physically hurt her, but she didn't break eye contact. I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. I don't want to lose you. I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. It's not that simple. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed everything I thought we had. Our marriage, my friendship with Mark, everything. I don't even know who you are anymore. She started crying again, and as much as I wanted to feel something, anything, for her, all I felt was numb. The tears didn't move me like they used to. Maybe I was too drained to care anymore, or maybe I had finally run out of sympathy. I'm not saying I don't love you, I continued, trying to put my tangled emotions into words. But love isn't enough, Jennifer. Not after this. Trust is broken, and I don't know if that's something we can ever get back. She nodded through her tears, wiping her face. I know. I know it's my fault. And I don't expect you to just forgive me right away. But can we at least try? Can we see if there's something left to save? I stared at her, my mind spinning. A part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that maybe we could rebuild, that maybe there was still something worth salvaging. But the other part of me, the part that had been burned by her betrayal, was screaming that it was too late. Too much damage had been done. What about Mark? I asked suddenly, catching her off guard. She blinked, confused. What about him? How do I know it's over? I asked, the anger bubbling up again. How do I know you're not just going to go running back to him when things get tough? Her face twisted in disgust. I don't want anything to do with him, she spat. I hate myself for what I did, and I hate him for being a part of it. I've already cut him out of my life. I need proof, I said firmly. I'm not going to try and fix this if you're still in contact with him. No more lies, Jennifer. I want full transparency. She nodded quickly, desperate. Of course. You can have access to my phone, my social media, everything. I'll block him, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just, please give me a chance. I leaned back against the wall, staring at her, trying to see if she meant it. And maybe she did. Maybe she was genuinely sorry, genuinely willing to put in the work to fix things. But I wasn't sure if I could do the same. Not yet. I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision, I said after a long silence. I need more time. This isn't something I can just decide overnight. She nodded, her face crumpling into a fresh wave of tears. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood up, feeling suffocated in the room with her. I need some air, I muttered, heading for the door. I'll be back later. As I walked out, I could hear her sobbing softly behind me, but I didn't turn back. I needed space, needed to think. This wasn't a decision I could make in the heat of the moment. I couldn't let her tears sway me, couldn't let guilt push me into trying to save something that might already be dead. I got into my car and drove, not really knowing where I was headed. Just driving, trying to clear my head, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Could I ever trust Jennifer again? Could I ever look at her without seeing the betrayal? Or was this the end of the road for us? I pulled over at the same park where I had told Sarah about Mark and Jennifer's affair. The place felt different now, emptier, colder. I sat there, thinking about everything that had happened. About what Dan had said, about what Sarah had gone through. And about what I was willing to put myself through. I knew there were two paths in front of me. One where I tried to salvage what was left of my marriage, and one where I walked away. Both paths looked miserable, but one might give me a shot at rebuilding my life. As I sat there, staring out at the trees, I realized that I already knew the answer. I wasn't the same person I was before all of this happened. And trying to go back to the way things were, pretending like we could fix this, it wasn't possible. When I finally stood up, I knew what I had to do. That night, when I walked back into the house, Jennifer was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked up, her face hopeful, waiting for me to speak. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steady. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I could see the hope flickering there. But as soon as I spoke the next words, that hope vanished. I can't do this anymore, I said quietly. We're done, Jennifer. I'm leaving. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, staring at me, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then, slowly, the tears started again. I'm sorry, I said, trying to keep my own emotions in check. But there's nothing left to save. I need to move on. She broke down, sobbing, but I didn't waver this time. I'd made my decision. I'd been hurt enough, and I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild something that was already broken beyond repair. In the end, leaving Jennifer wasn't easy. But it was the right choice. I didn't need to stay in a situation that was only going to cause me more pain. And as hard as it was to walk away, I knew it was the only way to truly start over. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least it was mine to walk. Alone.